Hello again and welcome to SPCM 4397, Effective Meeting Management. This is class number 2, or tape number 2 in this particular series. You should have received your syllabus by now. If you've not received a course syllabus, either give me a call at 743-2886 or call the Off-Campus Institute where you registered. These classes are, well, you're discovering if you've taped it already, but they are rebroadcast every Tuesday, Thursday, a.m., early morning from 3:10 to 4:30 a.m., and they're being broadcast over Channel 8. And this will continue into December if you're one of those channel hoppers out there, channel surfers who just happens to be tuning in. If you're interested in this class, then feel free to join us and learn more about meeting management. We're focusing in here from two perspectives and kind of shifting back and forth between those. The role of the professional meeting manager, if you're the person responsible for putting together a national convention of 10,000 or 50,000 people, what kinds of responsibilities are involved if you're doing a local convention or whatever. Later on in the semester, we'll be addressing the role of the individual who is chairing the meeting. If it's your job to prepare the agenda, hold the gavel, call the meeting to order, see that the business of a committee or a board is successfully completed. And we'll be looking at a more specific level when we get to that. Now, the folks that have their syllabus and have read it, which I hope that you do, and I know we've got some new people in the studio today, so I'm assuming there's some new home viewers out there as well. We welcome you, and I encourage you to look at that syllabus carefully, because we do have some face-to-face meetings scheduled in a few weeks on Saturdays, and at that time we'll be going more into reviews for midterms, specifics of projects. But I did bring along today two examples, one very good example and one awesome above and beyond the call of duty example of what's going to be involved in your project. And I want you to be thinking about that. This is not designed to ruin your Labor Day weekend, but as you because some of the folks won't see this until Thursday. But as you're relaxing, be creatively thinking about what kind of convention you would like to plan. Okay, this may be for an organization that you belong to, or it may be for an organization that you would just like to work for, if there's some group that's appealing to you. Now, the first example that I have here was a proposal that was actually made to Delta Gamma sorority. Or fraternity, pardon me. I haven't heard the outcome yet of whether their national board has acted on this or not, and whether or not it was accepted. Okay, but there's a mission statement down at the bottom from the hotels that were accepted that the student is recommending be accepted. And when you go to hotels, if you go to some hotels, I mentioned last time they were going to be looking at 3 videotapes and looking at those tapes of hotel properties, like going to a site inspection. So you'll have a lot of information about hotels once you've seen those. But you're most welcome to go to anything in the Houston area if you're going out of town some weekend, if you're going to a conference this semester. You know, look around. Be very honest with the sales department. If you contact people at the hotel, tell them you're a student working on a wishful project. You know, don't let them think that you're actually going in to book 300 of their hotel rooms in a year or something like that. We had 1 or 2 non-cooperative hotels last year, but most of the hotel reps were very cooperative. You know, you need to work into their schedule and so forth. We have a representative from the Hyatt coming in a week and a half or so, and we have a representative from the Westin Oaks and Galleria coming. So you'll meet some of the live bodies. They'll talk to you about what they do. Some of you may discover that careers in meeting management or related careers catering, hotel sales, convention sales, those kinds of things might be something that you're actually interested in. So you'll meet some folks that have made their careers out of that. But this particular proposal, you know, there's a title page. Now this one is done, and you can't read all of this, but that's okay. Let's see, we'll zoom in a little bit here. There's some facts about Houston. There's a page that's a letter of introduction from the student to the executive council saying what this is about. There's a page of Houston trivia. There's another page that indicates what the hotel that she selected will be like, the number of rooms, the probable dates that are recommended, the probable rates on those rooms. And when Jane Jordan from the Hyatt comes, she will talk to you at length, well, maybe not at length, but she will talk with you about room rates and what you can expect and how they project those, because the walk-in rate is very different from, say, a corporate rate. If Union Pacific Railroad or IBM or Shell or whomever will place their employees in a given hotel in Austin. You know, every time a company representative goes to Austin, if they always use that hotel, then the company gets a blanket discount there. So a corporate rate is going to be lower than a walk-in off the street rate if the two of you just decide to go to Dallas for the weekend and want to stay in a nice hotel. Okay, but a convention rate is generally much lower than even the corporate rate. And that's something that you bargain for, that you negotiate with the hotel over. And we'll get into more of that later on. Depending on the size of your convention, you know, you can often command a variety of perks and benefits and so forth. You normally get a free room for every 50 room nights that's picked up, whether that's 50 rooms in a given night, or if you have 25 rooms over 25 rooms times 2 nights, then you may get 1 free room for 1 night. And that's the kind of thing that you use if you have a guest speaker coming in to keynote at the banquet or something. You may be able to provide that as a complimentary service for your keynote speaker. So, but anyway, you know, in your proposal, you need to know what those rates are likely to be. Okay. She included the spec sheet from the Westin Galleria that has, and we'll look at more of these later on too, but the size of the ballroom, and you know, depending on how a room is set up, you can get a variety of sizes of people in there. Obviously, a banquet is your least efficient arrangement. I can get these words out. You know, if you're set up classroom style, that takes up more space than theater style. So as you're looking around, you'll find spec sheets on different organizations, different hotels. Okay, and then she just ran through a general information sheet, what they'll do about overflow accommodations, guest security, entertainment, shopping, airfares and transportation, what to expect there. And then she wrote a note to me at the end that indicated, in putting together the proposal, one, she saw how much work there was in doing this, and so you know, she'd encourage future generations to start early. But she talked to other people about their accommodations, the Sheraton Grand Hotel, South Shore Harbor Resort and Conference Center, the Doubletree Hotel at Post Oak, and so forth. And there's a statement about why she chose the particular hotel that she did. We'll get back to this graph in a minute. Okay, now that was a good, solid proposal. It got an A. It met the requirements. But you could tell from looking at the paper and all, it's basic in appeal. Well, one student, Kristen Roberts, and Kristen, if you're listening, I told your brother we were going to do this and either embarrass you or make you famous, as the case may be. Kristen had hopes of eventually doing a convention someday for the young lawyers Association. Let me move this graph until we're ready for it. Okay, she went to Paper Plus, and now you can buy fancy papers and so forth, and she just got some sample sheets and ran this through her laser printer. But all of what you see, she created. Okay, she did the cut and paste and layout for the brochure. So, she entitled it "The Chase Continues." She designed the little logo. These are made-up dates. This is not actually happening, but she set this up as if it were. Okay, she picked the MGM Grand and the Mirage hotels in Las Vegas because that's where she would like to go. And she was there for some other event, so I think she has seen those properties. But these are the hotels where the conference will be held, as well as where the delegates will be lodging. Both of the hotels are located on the Strip and are considered to be the most beautiful in the world. Well, now that's part of her PR and hype for the delegates. What you personally consider to be the most beautiful in the world is a question of taste. But anyway, this is the way she set up the trifold. Okay, the Young Lawyers Association welcomes the 1996 Annual Mock Trial Convention, and this is a convention that occurs each year. It's a real convention with a real group of people. It's a very large convention. Our 4-day conference will be hosted in the lavish city of Las Vegas, Nevada, and there's a little map there to give you a geographical visual on where that is. This year, the conference will not only have the mock trials, but also workshops that will help you in your practice. Prominent attorneys will head these workshops, such as Bill Barnett of Baker & Botts, Scott Rozelle of Vincent & Elkins, and so forth. After a long day in trial, Las Vegas, Nevada offers an infinite number of ways to relax and hang out. Dancing, gambling, or sightseeing are among the many attractions Las Vegas offers. Okay, then still using, to show you the difference in effect that paper can make, she bought coated paper and again ran this through the laser printer. So here's the theme again, but this is the booklet that convention delegates would receive. Okay, celebrating 65 years of excellence. Some of this she abstracted from publications of the association. This is taken from one of the brochures. But see how changing the colors makes it visually appealing. Using the coated paper gives an extra dimension of quality. In some instances, student projects that were turned in simply said, I don't have the money to go do this right now, but I understand that if we were printing this for real, then the organization's budget would pay for, and I would use coated paper of this color, laser print. There's a description of what they would do and all. And I know some of you have access to laser printers, some of you don't. Some of you are good at cut and paste, some may not be and all. But just so you have a feel for what's going on. Here's the itinerary, and the specifics are not important to us, but it's there early on so that delegates can find out what they're supposed to be doing when. Here are the workshops. And she just made up this stuff, okay, based on what she thought would be good. Here are more workshops. Okay, and all this stuff on workshop speakers, she just made this up. Okay, I don't know if these are real people or not, and some of the credentials I remember she said that she made up. But the idea is these are the kinds of folks you would like to locate. And, and if you actually can locate and identify real speakers, that's fine. Okay, and a little note that speakers that are not listed did not get their biographies in time to be printed. Okay, but you want a publication, and here's her expression of appreciation, some more logos and things. You want something that's going to make the delegates want to come to the convention. They need information about where it's taking place, what the itinerary is, what is the theme, when are you conducting business, and you don't have to work out a business agenda, but you need to distinguish in the schedule between when the business sessions are and when the pleasure activities are, the general itinerary and schedule for the convention. So be thinking about themes, be thinking about groups you would like to work for. You can book anywhere in the United States. Yeah?
Open on themes? I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the theme is your choice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just needs to be for a large group. And tell me how many people you're planning for. I'm thinking this was a convention of 10,000 people or so, and it may have been even larger. My memory fails me. Then in the actual notebook that she turned in, I guess I need to turn this around. There are sample forms that she, well, can't read it upside down. You probably can't read it from out there anyway. There are speaker requirement forms that she made up. There's a site selection checklist where she visited different properties and compared the size of rooms and the number of meeting rooms and the hotel rates, those sorts of things. There's a section in here on graphics that talks about resources and what she looked for, like evenness and ink coverage, straightness of the page, smudges, the reproductive quality of photographs, how straight the folds are. I mean, this is a gal that got meticulous right down in some instances to things that I didn't even think about. And that's what I'm saying. This one's above and beyond the call of duty, but it may give you ideas for things. She looked at styles of type, which is the most readable. So where some things look beautiful, but they're difficult to read, so forth. She even checked postal regulations to make sure that the brochures that would be mailed out fit within the parameters of what the post office permitted. You will need to include a budget, and she's got a section in here of what she knows about the accounting department and so forth. The sample hotel contracts. And then back in the big packets in the back are kind of the leftover things. The other option, she looked seriously at San Francisco and Atlanta, and she wrote off to various hotels asking for packets of materials from those hotels. And so to verify that she'd done that, this is all the reject stuff back here in the back, but it's her way of letting me know that she really did pull all those materials in order to cross-check and compare. You'll be able to get some of that information from the videotapes that we'll see later on, because we didn't have those the last time this class was taught. So anyway, maybe this will give you some ideas for things that you might like to do and so forth. But get creative, use your imagination, and start thinking about what your choices are and how you would do it if somebody was paying you $50,000 a year to put their convention together for them. Or if you worked for the local, if you were a volunteer with the Convention Bureau, or if you're the lucky president-elect of your organization and part of your duties as vice president or president-elect includes planning a convention. And we mentioned last time, but many organizations have that as a function of the vice president or president-elect or equivalent person. Other corporate organizations may have a full-time professional meeting manager. Yeah?
There she had a existing group. We may use hypothetical groups, right?
Right. Check, if you're using a hypothetical group, check with me just so I understand who you're choosing and why you're doing it. Okay, other questions about those? Okay, well that's to kind of get you thinking, and if a question pops in your mind 20 minutes from now, ask, and maybe we'll know the answer. Okay, last time we looked at some graphs. And we're going to finish up with those today. We'll move a little faster than we did last time, hopefully, since I thought we'd get through all of them last class and we didn't, but that's all right. Okay, as I mentioned before, there's a journal of professional convention management called Convene, and that's where this information is coming from. It's been around, I don't know, 6 or 8 years, I think. Well, let's see, I guess 10, because this is volume 10, number 2. Great deductive thinking there. Okay, this is the 4th year that they've done a market survey about meetings, and we looked at some data from the 3rd survey in 1994 last time, because it had a little different information from this. But the people reporting, must have missed a page. Yeah. Let's go back here. Okay. The people who answered this questionnaire, and I think there were about 235, 237 organizations that responded to this. And most of those, this should be brown on your home set, but anyway, the big chunk of the pie graph is the group of professional societies, doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, whatever, but professional organizations that reported. This section over here, which could be anything from pink, orange, or red, depending on your setting, is trade associations. The purple section, which is marked SMERF, stands for social, military, educational, religious, and fraternal. Okay? And then there's a tiny little sliver of other. So most of the people reporting were professional groups, followed by trade and SMERF organizations. Okay, the membership of these groups, of those reporting, half of 50% roughly is national, and then this other chunk over here is international. So you've got, and then the purple is state. So mostly the data that you're getting here is coming from national and or international organizations. And again, we're doing this to help you understand the significance of this industry. You know, some of you are hearing your first tape with this one. And these are large, in many instances, very large groups that use a lot of meeting planners, a lot of exhibition space, and so forth. How large was the membership of your association? You've got 30% here in the 1,000 to 5,000 range, and then less than 1,000. But 13% more than 50,000 members. Okay, now not all members attend an annual meeting or a convention, of course, but you're going to get a substantial portion in many instances. Okay, bottom graph, the percentage of the membership based outside of the United States. 49%, as you saw in the other graph, were national. So less than 5% is outside of the United States, and that tapers on across there. Okay, what was the total annual budget for your association in '94? You'll see that these numbers went up compared to the year before. But here's the big cluster at 35%. The mean is $4,198,033. So you've got almost 36% of those organizations that have an annual budget of between $1 and $5 million. Okay, since 1990, has the number of full-time employees in your organization's convention meetings department increased, decreased, or remained the same? And the brown section increased, this red section decreased, purple section remained the same. So the field is growing, the meetings are increasing, and so on. Okay, now this is an interesting one. How large was your association's convention meeting budget in 1994? And over here at 33.3%, more than $1 million. It's a lot of money for an organization to spend on meetings. Okay, and then they taper down. How did that 94 convention meeting budget compare with 93? Almost 52% had an increase. Of course, inflation contributes to some of that, but still it's holding on. Often inflation doesn't contribute to pay raises, but meeting budgets did go up. How does the projected 95 convention meeting budget compare with 94? And they've got an increase. Here is a no change. This is an increase. Okay, principal sources of associations' income. We saw the year before dues played a substantial part. Dues still handles a big chunk of the pie, but the convention, exhibits, and meetings represents 34%. And we talked last time how a number of organizations have exhibitions as a major portion of what they're doing. And if that's something that you have to work with the organization, then you need to know about that and take that into account. I was in one meeting where the parking garage of one floor of the parking garage of the hotel was converted to exhibition space because the ballroom wasn't long enough. And they rolled out some stuff kind of like AstroTurf and put up temporary partitions. It was kind of a tacky place. You know, it was not an ideal setting, in my opinion. But you know, it may be that other factors like room rates and availability of the hotel on the weekend that they needed it. There are lots of things that come into play in something like that. But that was at least a way that they solved it with that particular hotel, was to put artificial carpet and temporary partitions up. Okay, and then they go ahead and break this down with the trade associations, professional groups, and SMRFs as to their sources of income. We don't have to worry about that. Okay, how many events with exhibits does your association sponsor each year? The large proportion said one. Now, it's a big deal to pull off a major exhibition. You know, if it's an auto show or a boat show or the homeowners annual convention, some of the things that you see coming to the Astor Hall here in Houston. That's a big deal. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's a hassle in many ways. And so usually once a year is enough. But there are some organizations that 5.5% that have more than 10. You know, but it's not clear from this who is exhibiting what. The net square footage, now this is something you may want to watch, and you'll need to know with the group, whatever group you select, you'll need to kind of make up a ballpark figure for that. 27% of the people use less than 25,000 square feet, net square feet. Okay, but there's a handful, 7.4%, that use more than 250,000 net square feet. And as you get specs on different hotels, part of the information that you'll see will show you, you know, the ballroom, and some hotels have exhibition space in addition to the ballrooms and all. Sometimes the lobbies can be converted for that purpose. And if you just have a small booths to show, you know, maybe if it's a sorority or fraternity convention and jewelers are going to come in, or the people that sell sweatshirts, t-shirts, that sort of thing, those don't require very much exhibition space. So it depends on what it is that's being exhibited. You know, if you're showing off boats and automobiles, you need a lot more space than if you're showing off printing supplies or jewelry or something like that. And you need to think about what your people would like to see. You know, if this is the state convention of nurses, what are exhibitors likely to bring in for that? If this is national, well, you're doing national. If it's the national convention of nurses, if it's the national convention of doctors, You know, hospitals are going to want to exhibit everything from equipment to uniforms to possibly do recruiting for employees. Okay. Number of exhibitors, reserving space in the largest show, those kind of scattered out, about between 100 and 250. You know, but how many people are if you're exhibiting textbooks, how many people are likely to come? If you're showing automobiles or boats or tractor trailers, you know, how many people are likely to exhibit and how much space will they need? Okay. What was the attendance at the largest annual convention or meeting that you sponsored in '94? Okay, and that's something you'll want to find out for your hypothetical group. Less than 1,000, about 32%, but between 1,000 and 5,000 people, 39%. That's a hearty-sized convention. To me, at least, up to about 400 people is fairly easily manageable. I mean, you have things to do, you know, but once you go over about 500, then the logistics of getting enough rooms and meal arrangements and all those things become more complicated. Most hotels can handle a luncheon for 200 or 300 people without much trouble. You know, and many of the large hotels have ballrooms that break into, that partition off either by half or by thirds, and that's no big deal. But if you're trying to feed 1,000 people or 2,000 people, then that will impact greatly, you know, the kind of space that you need and the number of hotels that you have available for that. So lots of conventions of between 1,000 and 5,000 people. But I've known of some organizations, some fraternities, so forth, that have 8,000, 10,000 people in annual convention. And you know, here there's a tiny percentage of a little over 1% that had more than 50,000 people at one convention, at one annual meeting. So you don't have to plan for a group that large. You know, I just want you thinking large scale. Okay, then there's a discussion of revenues. We don't really need to go into that. Most of the revenue is coming in from registration, and then the second major source of income is exhibit sales. So if you have exhibitors, generally they pay to cover their own space. There are some exceptions to that with smaller organizations where if you really need an exhibitor there, and it's more likely to happen at, say, a state level. Say if you want national textbook companies to come in for a state organization's meeting, and they have budgeted, primarily focused their budget on national, then you may need to provide some perks, provide free space in order to encourage them to come in. Okay, here you just need to look at the categories, not the numbers of things, but what percentage of expenses did each of the following account for? And food and beverage is the biggie at 24%. Okay, but kinds of things that will go into your budgets and that you need to think through. Food and beverage, what kind of banquets are you having? I'll tell you on the front end, if you're going to serve alcohol, you ought to plan on a cash bar. You know, most groups cannot afford what their members can consume. Okay, marketing and promotion, flyers that go out ahead of time, teasers, the packets of mail-outs. Sometimes there's advertising in the convention program one year for the next year. But anyway, whatever you do, marketing and promotion. Okay, speakers and entertainment, good speakers charge money. Once in a while you find a good person who will come for free because they're a member of the organization, or you know, they just love that particular group and they're willing to help out. But national keynote speakers may charge you anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500 a day. You can get some nice speakers for $250 or $500 a day. But just know, if you're trying to get nationally eminent people, if you can even get a Bill Cosby or a Shel Silverstein or somebody like that to show up, you're probably going to pay dearly for them. But they have agents and fees and schedules and so forth. So anyway, that's another category. Audio-visual, some groups need lots of audio-visual, others need less. You get a convention of radio television professors, they probably need lots of VCRs and so forth, depending on what kind of convention it is. If it's an educational convocation of some sort, again, you may need plenty of visual aid equipment. Okay, staff travel and accommodations. Normally, the officers of an organization travel free. It's one of the few perks of being elected as an officer, that your hotel accommodations are covered, airfare may be covered, and so forth. Okay, and in your case, you'd make up a ballpark figure for what's going on, unless you actually know who the officers are and from what points they're traveling and all. But don't bog down at that level. Okay, registration and housing, destination management, insurance is a tiny part, but there are some instances where you need to pay for insurance for properties, and then there will just be other things that you run across as well. The budgets on those 94 events, 30% spent more than $1 million, but there was about 5% that spent less than $50,000. It depends on the size of the group, so that's hard to know. Okay, we're going to take a quick look at small meetings and then we'll be through, because as we've said before, the latter part of the semester will focus on small meetings. How many meetings, excluding conventions and expositions, did your association sponsor in 1994? Okay, 27% had fewer than 5, but over here we've got 13.9% that had more than 100. So there are a lot of little meetings going on too. Okay, what percentage of your small meetings is represented by each of the following? Okay, committee meetings, about 1/3. And we'll be talking later on about how to set agendas, how to prepare, and some basic things about presiding at committee meetings. Seminars, board meetings, and today we're going to define those terms and distinguish between those. Training sessions and other. And then the types of facilities, as we look at the videotapes of different properties, we'll be comparing and looking at different kinds of properties. But there are downtown hotels, and we can see about 45% use those. Resorts, airport hotels, suburban hotels, and conference centers. We talked a little about those last time as well. So you may have to go back and review that tape and jog your memory. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, well, let's get some working definitions down. In the first class, we referred to committee meetings, board meetings, annual meetings. These are the kinds of things, kinds of meetings that organizations have. Well, when we're talking about a committee, we're talking about one or more. You can have a committee of one. And I've given you the page, well, might help to get it in focus there. I've given you the page citation in Roberts so that you can correlate that and go back and read more about it if you want to. In Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, the 1990 edition. That's what we're using in this class as a reference. Okay, a committee is one or more elected or appointed persons. And they're selected to consider, investigate, or take action. Okay, and usually we think of a committee as 3 or 5 or so people. Some committees are very large and you know, have a large makeup. If you have a national organization of 5,000 people, then a committee of 50 is still pretty small compared to the whole. If it's a civic club of 100 people, then a committee of 5 or 7, you know, may be proportional. But committees investigate things, they make recommendations to the parent organization about courses of action that should be taken. Those are the kinds of things that committees do. Sometimes the committee actually takes the action. The organization says we need to renovate the place, and we're going to select a committee of 5 people and give them $50,000 and let them redecorate. And that's the committee that actually is empowered to go out and spend that money and make it a more beautiful place. Committees are generally classified as standing, special, or executive. And even if the organization doesn't know to call them that, that's what they are. There are special committees that are simply appointed for a certain period of time to take care of the business of getting the clubhouse painted, of purchasing a new computer for the organization. A special committee may be appointed by the president, it may be elected by the organization. There are a variety of ways that you get committees, combinations and variations on elected or appointed. But a special committee exists for the duration of the job that it has to do. And then when it accomplishes its task, it's done. Okay, on the other hand, there are some organizations that keep standing committees. Those committees stand all year long. Maybe the membership committee, the publications committee, the scholarship committee, the financial committee. It's a group of people that they need throughout the year. Sometimes committee members are elected to 3-year terms, or occasionally 5, but usually 3 is a good round number if you want continuity. Some groups will elect for 3 years, 1/3 every year, so you get a rotating membership, a staggered committee membership with one of the senior members of the committee chairing the committee, and that's a good plan. The bylaws of any organization, everybody know what bylaws are? Yes, no, shake your head. Maybe, okay. Bylaws are the governing documents of an organization. Must have bylaws, and most organizations, even if they're not incorporated, have bylaws. All of the campus organizations here at the University of Houston, for example, have to have a set of bylaws on file. Bylaws tell you the name, the purpose, the membership, what are the qualifications for membership? Do you have regular members, honorary members, alumni members, so forth. There's a sample set of bylaws in Robert if you need to take a look at it. But what's the membership? Let's say name, object, membership. The officers, I'm trying to do these in the right order for you. The officers are normally listed next with the characteristics or responsibilities of the office. Then the meetings, when does it meet? And sometimes that's brief, sometimes it's more complicated. Do they have regular monthly meetings? Do they meet once a year? And so forth. Then what kind of committees do they have? And if there's an executive committee, that's usually listed first, and I have that mentioned up here. The executive committee normally includes the officers. It may also include some at-large types of people as well, some delegates at large who are elected out of the membership to make up that board. And then the standing committees will be listed. And they will report, for example, in the order that they're listed in the bylaws. Most groups put their most important committees first, Occasionally you find them listed alphabetically, but anyway, if you're making up an agenda for a meeting and you need to list committee reports, and you don't have any other reason for listing them differently, you just list them in the order that they're listed in the bylaws. The method of amendment. Okay, and probably before that, after committees, you would list your parliamentary authority, then you would list the method of amendment, and if you report to the IRS now requires that you have a dissolution clause at the end, a dissolution clause. What happens if the organization dissolves? Okay, and basically that clause should say the officers don't get the money. Okay, the membership doesn't get the money. Generally it will say, it will either name a national parent organization, if it's a local or regional group or chapter, that if it dissolves, the monies are turned over to national. If it's a national organization that dissolves, then name some charities that it would go to. Otherwise, you might have some instances where you have unscrupulous officers and members that would push to dissolve an organization that's got $500,000 in the bank or something and say, oh, let's just divide that up among ourselves and dissolve this group and go have a party. But it doesn't work that way. Besides being highly unethical, it's also illegal, and the IRS frowns on that sort of thing. Okay, but your committees, if you think about committees that you've served on, they've usually either been appointed, plan the holiday social, do a fundraiser or something. Those are special. But nominating committees, financial committees, public relations, those kinds of things are likely to be standing committees that are named for at least a year and have an ongoing function. Okay, if you have, some organizations have governing boards, and these may be the Board of Trustees. The university has a Board of Regents. Sometimes it's called the Board of Directors. They move under different labels. These may be elected or appointed, but they have, and usually they're called a board because they have special administrative, almost quasi-judicial power. They have a responsibility that is very important, is crucial to the ongoing welfare of the organization, and their powers will be listed in the bylaws, at least the parameters of those powers. But the powers are usually greater and broader than that of simply the executive committee. An executive committee is often powered to function between meetings. If the club meets every month, then the executive committee will take care of things in between. Or if it's a state organization that holds an annual convention, the executive committee will take care of things between those meetings. But generally, boards have more power. Okay, meetings need to be distinguished from conventions. When we're talking about a meeting, normally, and the jargon in your parliamentary authority, whether it's Sturgis or Robert or Kesey or whomever, a meeting refers to a single official gathering, like the monthly meeting of the civic club or the sorority or fraternity. It may have short breaks. Everybody stops for 10 or 15 minutes, to go out and get a Coke or whatever. And we call that a recess. A short break in a meeting is a recess. But it's still a meeting, even if it has a short break. Okay, when you get to something like a convention, then you have a series of connected meetings. Okay, and there are some breaks in between those that are kind of like long recesses. But it's still viewed like one long meeting. If you are And sometimes you'll see convention programs where it will say General Session 1, the next day will be General Session 2. They may skip a day and then have General Session 3 on the last day of the convention. Well, they don't start, we'll look later on at agendas, you know, the call to order, the reading of the minutes, unfinished business, new business, those kinds of things. That agenda doesn't start over again with each general session. You pick up where you left off, okay? But those sessions are a session refers to a series of connected meetings devoted to a single order of business or program or agenda. So some groups will call their meeting the 4th annual session of the American Institute of Parliamentarians, or the 35th annual session of the Professional Fraternity Association. But it's a series of connected meetings. And in some people's heads, that's the same thing as a convention. But as Robert uses the term convention, convention often means an assembly of delegates. Now, sometimes a delegate is anybody who shows up. You know, Texas Speech Convention calls itself a convention, but it doesn't have elected delegates. It has representatives from the various geographical areas around the state. And whoever shows up is qualified to vote at any meeting where votes are taking place. So the term is used a little more loosely there. But often state or national groups will call themselves conventions and involve an assembly of delegates that then come from local units. Some other names, some conventions are also called conferences, convocation, General Assembly, House of Delegates, House of Representatives. Those last two terms I put a little asterisk on because they're often used to distinguish the voting members from other people who are attending for educational or social activities. For example, the Speech Communication Association of America has probably, at least 3,000 people who come to an annual convention or an annual meeting. And then there is a legislative assembly that has, which is their name for the House of Delegates or the House of Representatives. But those are the people elected by the membership as a whole. And they're the ones who vote on the budget, on policy changes. The whole membership votes by mail on the officers and some other matters that the Legislative Assembly deems should come before the whole group. And the national membership by mail would vote on anything that was a bylaws change. Now, why do you think they vote by mail on big important issues? Later on we'll worry about methods of voting and so forth. But why would an organization choose to have a mail ballot? Okay?
So that voters can be anonymous?
Okay, you could do that with the secret ballot, but right, anonymity may be part of the issue. Nicole?
Convenience to get as much response as possible.
Oh, yeah, to get as much response as possible. What else happens when you've got a national convention moving around the country? Who's going to attend the most? Why do you move a national convention around the country? Because we want to see different locations? Maybe, but there's a more logical reason. Go ahead.
Get as much participation from the different areas.
Okay. Yeah, generally groups will move, say, from the eastern, they may have 3 site zones, the eastern United States, central, and western, and they'll go west, central, east, west, central, east, central, because of the costs that are involved in bringing people to those conventions, whether the organization is paying for it or whether the individual is paying for it. But wherever the convention is held, you're going to get a large local draw of people. And if you say that whoever shows up can vote, then you're going to get a geographical skew in your elections and in your decision making. Okay? And we watch that. It's okay because we know it's going to happen. We watch that happen within Texas Speech Association, TSCA, Texas Speech Communication Association. They have a 5-area geographical rotation, and I never remember which way it goes, you know, but there's west and south and central and east and north. And it makes a difference, and they also alternate their officers. The presidents have to alternate between colleges and universities and high schools. So it's a real interesting political study to see who runs for office, and you have to time the time of your campaign to the year. You know, if you're a university professor, you got to get on the right year for that election, but then you also have to coordinate it with the geographical skew that's going to occur. Because somebody from the University of North Texas has a much better chance of being elected if the convention is in Dallas than if the convention is in Corpus Christi. Okay, assuming the qualifications are reasonably the same and so forth. Okay, but anyway, a convention goes by a lot of different names, and part of what you'll want to be familiar with and working with that group is the names of what they're calling themselves. One group I worked with as parliamentarian once referred to their annual meeting as their annual boule. Anybody know what that word means? Okay, it's B-O-U-L-E with an accent on it. Well, a boule is a big happening, kind of like an event of celebration. I think it has French roots to it. You know, I don't know where they came up with the term, but when I first contacted the officers, you know, they were saying things like, well, our boule last year was held in such and such location, and 2 years ago boule was in such and such. What are they talking about? You know, because this was a new word for me. But it's a word that ended up on their trifolds and their convention packets and so forth. So, okay. But you may have labels like House of Delegates, House of Representatives that set apart the voting population from the rest of the convention. 3 crucial committees that have to meet before a convention is legitimately underway. And I've seen lots of conventions come and go and never formally have these 3 committees report. But it's kind of implicit in what they're doing. But Robert says, page 601, that you need a credentials committee, a rules committee, and a program committee. Now, that's if you have voting delegates that need to be certified. Okay, but the credentials committee is the group, and it's usually headed by the secretary, the executive secretary, someone of that nature. They're the people who certify the list of officers, the list of delegates. If you have alternates, they would certify the alternates. They would keep track of who is on the convention floor at any point in time, you know, if a delegate leaves and an alternate comes on. Sometimes this involves a very elaborate badging process with color-coded badges that the people wear during meeting times and so forth. But it's somebody's job to keep track of that. Okay, if the group is small enough, then you'll have an executive secretary who knows all the members, and that's no problem. Or when the people register, it may be that, you know, you have color-coded name tags, and the members wear one color, spouses and other guests wear another color, and so forth. And then when you're taking a vote, the presiding officer asks, you know, the voting members to stand if you've got these people mixed all through your audience. But anyway, there's some ways to deal with that. The Rules Committee drafts the rules that the organization will use. Now sometimes you're just under a parliamentary authority like Farwell or Sturgis or Robert or whatever, and you just use the basic rules in there. Each person gets 10 minutes to an issue. You take turns on the topics, try to alternate pro and con. Nobody gets to talk a second time until everybody who wants a first turn has had that. And that works very well for some groups. Others where you have very heated agendas, lots of politically hot issues, you may need a rules committee that functions in a much more formal manner, that prepares those rules and they're distributed to the people ahead of time. The assembly, the convention, whatever you're calling them, have to adopt those rules. They have to agree to put themselves under those rules. But you may find that it's a good idea from the very beginning to put limits on debate and say, for example, limit each speaker to 2 minutes. Okay, with an option of, by vote of the assembly, extending that for another 2 minutes if the delegates want to hear. But if you've got something like that, then you need timekeepers who are appointed with good, clear stopwatches with time cards that they can hold up that say 2, 1, 1/2, 0, and when that 0 comes, you know, they raise that tag high and clear so that the membership is aware that the speaker's out of time, so the presiding officer is aware that the person is out of time. Okay, the program committee is normally the vice president, whoever is in, or president-elect, whoever is in charge of putting the convention program together normally chairs the program committee. The president is usually on that committee. The president, working with the secretary, normally prepares the agenda. And the order of business is, as you'll see in Robert, the call to order, invocation ceremonies. We'll look this over in detail another day. But the committee reports, unfinished business and so forth, as I mentioned a minute ago. The agenda fills in the order of business, so that if, you know, instead of just saying committee reports on order of business, the agenda would actually list sometimes 15 or 30 different committees that have to report. If this is a big national convention, you know, you may have lots of committees. Now, order of business will say unfinished business. The agenda will list every item of unfinished business. The order of business will say new business. The agenda will list all the items of new business. And sometimes that's 3 or 4 pages long, you know, and you don't get through. Some groups have anywhere from 5 to 100 different resolutions that they need to address during the course of a week. Some conventions run a whole week, and you know, they just have dozens of items of business that they address. And so your agenda fills in the specifics under the order of business. But anyway, those 3 committees are crucial to getting a convention off the ground. Any questions? Okay. Okay, we're going to do some kind of quick review of organizational theory. We'll just kind of scratch the surface with that today and continue with it next time. But as we get into some of this theory, and if you've had organizational communication before, then this should sound familiar to you. You've got an old OrgComm textbook somewhere. You may want to pull it out and dust it off and just brush up. But I want you thinking about, how is a hotel, for example, a system? How is any organization a system? We're going to talk about that. You know, but whether it's a sorority, a fraternity, a civic club, the American Medical Association, a Hyatt hotel, Sheraton, I mean, pick your hotel. How are these systems, how is something even as small as a board of directors a system? And then why is information transportation important in an organization? Why is information movement or transportation important in an organization? And we're going to look at some ways that information flows. Okay, let's look at some characteristics of organizations as systems. Okay, usually we think of organizations and know them either through their products, roles, or services. And it involves a coordination of activities. It involves a lot of people, many people, whatever that means. You know, it's a relative term. But they have a common purpose or goal. There's a division of labor and function within the organization. And there's some kind of hierarchy of authority and responsibility. So whether this is a hotel that has to coordinate housekeeping with the front desk, you know, the rooms have to be clean before someone else can check in. Whether it's a national professional association that has to coordinate their educational function with their membership drive and so forth. There are just many different functions that groups have. Okay, they're all characterized by, all organizations are systems, okay? And typical characteristics of systems are wholeness, the idea that when you bring all those parts together, the whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. Kind of like when you bring the different units of the university together, then we become a degree-granting institution, and yet no one department on campus can grant a degree by itself. You know, a pizza's not a pizza until you put all those parts together and get a whole. So the idea is the whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. As soon as you get a system, hierarchy starts to emerge. Leadership kicks in, somebody becomes the leader, someone has higher status than the other. Some groups are far more equal and egalitarian than others. But generally, you know, the larger the organization is, the more hierarchy is going to fall out from the president down to the newest member and so forth. All systems seek equilibrium. They try to maintain balance within the group, within the organization. It may be financial balance between income and expenditures, maybe balance in goals. They can't accomplish all of their goals at the same time, and so they pick and choose and adjust according to that. But balance is important. You know that in your own human system, balance is important. You have to balance work and play and food and sleep and exercise and activity and so forth. And the same is true of organizations. Whatever their needs are, they have to reach some balance within that. Equifinality says that there's more than one way to reach a goal, kind of like a rat trying to get through a maze to a piece of cheese. If one way is blocked off, it's a natural response to try a different route. Some students change their majors 4 or 5 times before they graduate. You know, because the goal is the degree, any degree, to make you more marketable. And so you'll change those routes. Well, organizations do the same thing. If one marketing plan doesn't work, then they adjust to another one. You change the ingredients in your national soda pop and people don't buy it, you change and adapt to something else. But equifinality says there's more than one way to reach a given end state. Interdependence says all those parts affect one another. They're interdependent on each other. A affects B, B affects C, C affects D, D affects A, and it's all interrelated. If you look at the university, if they didn't hire faculty to teach the classes, oops. With our distance learning, if the cameraman didn't show up, or they put the camera over here on the wall when they're supposed to be putting it on the visuals, we'd have some problems. We're all interdependent on each other. It's real nice that the electricity is on down here. The people in charge are taking care of the maintenance needs of the building. The air conditioning's on. That makes it more pleasant. If the power goes, we'd all be sitting here in the dark. Okay, I'm assured there's an emergency backup system and that the staff has flashlights and there's an exit nearby. But we would have a problem conducting class if that were the case. So whether it's central supply in a hospital, getting the supplies to the emergency room or the operating room, or whether it's a university working out the balance of classes and students and monies and faculty, or a national professional association balancing its budget against what it can do. All of that, all those parts are interdependent on each other and they affect each other. Adaptability is important. The organizations, whether it's your human system or a big, massive organization, the organization that can adapt and go with the flow is the one that's going to survive. Okay? And so whether it's in the planning of a national meeting, you've got a meeting planned and there's a hurricane coming ashore. What are you going to do about that? Well, hopefully you've made adequate advance plans so that you have some contingencies worked out for that if your booking is suddenly going to fall off or whatever. How will you get information to members? You don't have to work out that kind of risk management plan for your project in here, but if you're a professional meeting planner, then risk management, the ability to adjust and be adaptable may be a very important part of what you're doing. Exchange with the environment. Let's look at the next visual as we address that one a little bit. But as we talk about systems, we're talking about open systems. And open systems have exchange with the environment. The university receives new students, turns out educated students. We get feedback. This RTV major that graduated, can they in fact run a camera, do a good job? Can the journalist report on their assignment and do a good job or not? So the system takes input, processes that into output back into the environment. The environment in turn gives feedback to the organization. The long-range goal of organizations is survival. Okay, and sometimes members get annoyed with organizations because they don't do exactly what they would prefer that they do. Sometimes lost my train of thought. Sometimes all of the needs of the members are not met just as they think they should be met. Maybe the class that you wanted is closed. It isn't scheduled at the time that you would like for it to be scheduled. Or if you're a meeting manager, you don't have as much money in your budget as you would like to have or as you think that you need. But the parent organization is looking at that long-range goal of survival, whether it's a hospital trying to turn indigent patients away so that they don't go bankrupt, whether or not it's the president or the chief financial officer of an organization looking at the budget and saying, we have, usually probably be the board or executive committee, we have X number of dollars to work with in this situation, and therefore we have allocated a specific amount to a particular project or activity. But we've got constraints there because we want the organization to survive. The university controls the enrollment on classes, departments do that and so forth, because they don't want their faculty unemployed one semester. You know, although I guess you could make some argument for quadrupling the size or tripling the size of the classes in one semester, and then everybody takes a 9-month vacation later on. But our classrooms won't permit that. Okay, that would be a different kind of issue. So the organization needs to survive. It's characterized by wholeness, hierarchy, equilibrium, equifinality, interdependence, and so on. Next time we'll continue looking at organizations and looking at the flow of information within those organizations. We're going to find that information is crucial to reducing uncertainty, and reducing uncertainty is crucial to the well-being of the organization. So we'll look at information flow and how that information is managed.